Hi and welcome to video 6 in the Gatsby JS course. In this video we'll be setting up and using Google Fonts in our website. If we first switch to the design, we can take a look at the font. In the designs we're using Montserrat for the fonts throughout the entire website. This being said, we're going to implement two fonts in our application, and this is primarily so that you know how to do it in the future. We're going to use Montserrat for all the primary headers, so the H1s through to H6s, and then for the rest of the application we're going to be using Source Sans Pro. The first thing I tend to do when implementing things using third-party services, such as Google Fonts, is check the Gatsby plugin library. So if we just go to gatsbyjs.com, and then in the primary navigation you can see plugins. You can navigate to that plugins option, and then we can start typing fonts, Google Fonts, and then we have some options here. So I'm going to go for this third option down, Gatsby plugin Google Fonts, and that's primarily because I've used this before and it seems to work really nicely. But any of these should be a viable option, and the documentation will run you through setting it up, because essentially we've just got to copy this documentation now. So let's get started. First we want to copy this npm install script, switch back to our VS Code instance and get that going. So if I just hit enter on that. Whilst our package is installing, we'll just go back to the plugins documentation and we'll copy the plugin script. So inside our Gatsby config.js, we have this site metadata and plugins. We're using the styled component plugin at the moment, so we're going to add this into it as well. So if we just copy this object out, go back to our application, you see that that install has now finished. Go to our Gatsby config.js. And then this is the other plugin that we're using. You'll notice that that's just a string with a plugin name. And the reason it's just got a plugin name and it's not an object like the one we're about to paste in is because we don't need to change any of the options in the Gatsby plugin styled components. So if you're just using a plugin as is and you don't need to change anything, you can just put the string name in. But when you need to change things in a plugin, you have to pass it through as an object, and then you pass resolve and resolve it by the plugin's name. And then we have the options. The options might look slightly different. Just delete these comments. The reason I just deleted that backslash here was because it was escaping a character, but as we're using backticks, we don't need to worry about escaping the characters. The options for each package you come across will be slightly different, as these are tailored towards this Gatsby plugin Google Fonts. The options for this plugin are relatively simple. So we have fonts, which will be the fonts we want to use inside our application. You'll see that we are using the demo script here, but that imports Source Sans Pro, and that is what we want to use for our body. So the only font we need to add into this is Montserrat, and we need to remove this limelight. The other property on this is display swap, and what that says is essentially use the fallback font until the Google fonts have downloaded and then swap them out. So we don't want to hold the page rendering whilst we wait for fonts. We want it to show straight away even if the fonts aren't ready, and then switch the Google fonts into it when they are ready, so that there's no visible delay of content. I've left an article in the description that will explain in detail how display swap works and what it does. So now we've got that in, let's go and have a look on Google for our Montserrat font. So navigate to fonts.google.com. Then inside the search bar, we can search for fonts. So we'll search for Montserrat. You'll see Montserrat comes up here. We just want the standard Montserrat. We don't care for alternates, or I'm not going to try and pronounce that. So let's just click that. And then we don't have any extra bold or extra thin or any other variants. We're just going to be simple with our headers, and we're going to use either regular or light. So for now, I'm going to select both of these. And then in the right here, you can see that we have this selected family in a review. We don't actually need to download this or go to the API docs. I'm just doing this primarily to show you where you can find these fonts, and you can find things like the names. So inside the link and import scripts, you can see that they say family equals Montserrat. That's the naming we need to use. We need to make sure the capitalization is all correct. So I'm just going to copy that, go back to here, and we can swap out limelight for Montserrat, because we don't need limelight. Now if I go back to fonts.google.com, we said we needed two weights, light 300 and regular 400. You can see here they just get passed in as 300 and 400, so we're going to do the same here. just like our Source Sans Pro, do colon 300 and 400. The I on Source Sans Pro means italics, so that'll be import the 300, 400 and 700 weights and also the 400 italic variant. So I'll give that a save. We are now saying Gatsby use the styled component plugin and use the Resolve Gatsby plugin Google Fonts and use it with these options. The options are get Montserrat at weight 3 and 400 and get Source Sans Pro at 3, 4, 4 italics, 700 and render that with the display set to swap so we can load our page and then swap the fonts when they're available. So now if we get this running, let's see if we get any errors. So we've not implemented the fonts at this stage. I'm just checking to see if it runs successfully, because if it fails at this point, it means we've probably got a bit of setup wrong here somewhere. And we've got success through most of that. So I think it would have normally would have failed by this point if there was a problem. So it looks like we're all good. Let's go to our browser and check that it's all running. Lovely, so we can see all of our website perfectly here. The fonts are not in use yet, so let's start working on that. Now if we go to our theme.js, first thing we'll do is we'll add these fonts to our main theme constant that gets passed in to our theme provider so we can access it through the site. So we'll create a fonts object. Inside there we'll create header property and we'll set that equal to Montserrat. So we just set these equal to the font names and then copy. So that'll be the rest of the copy on the page. We want to set to Source Sans Pro. Lovely. Let's give that a save. Now that's being passed into the theme provider and we can access it inside the global styles like we are with the background color and the text color. So on our body, we want to make sure that we're using Source Sans Pro throughout the application. So let's set the font family and we'll copy this from above and we'll set that to theme.fonts.copy. And we'll set the fallback font to sans serif. And the reason we're setting a fallback font to sans serif is because Source Sans Pro is a sans serif font and we are implementing that swap functionality. So when the page first loads, we don't want the backticks on things like the H and the M when it swaps out. We want to swap it out from a system sans serif font. So it will change, but it won't be as noticeable. So let's just give that a save. Now we've got the font family in for our body styles. Let's implement our header ones for H1, H2 and H3. The reason I'm not going for 4, 5 and 6 is because I probably won't use them in this application, so there's no need to apply the rule onto everything. And again, actually we'll just copy that snippet from above. This time we want to say theme.fonts.header. And now let's give that a save. If we switch back to our application, perfect, all is in order. So the home, blog about, contact and the footer are all using Source Sans Pro, and then the H1 is using the Montserrat font. Now we have the basics of our typography implemented, we are ready to move on to the next video where we'll be implementing all the styles for our homepage and starting to use images inside of Gatsby. Thanks and see you in the next video.